Hey folks, welcome back. So today we are going to be making some upgrades on my RO system that I use for concentrating sap from maple trees down prior to putting it on the evaporator arch to boil it to make maple syrup. Now this is going to be part one of probably 2 parts on this upgrade. I had some ideas on a new way to build it, and as is often the case with new ideas, it looks great on paper and theoretically it should work. But once you start putting it into practice, some of the little gremlins start coming out, and you have to start chasing down a few little issues that you didn't foresee when it was just on paper. So this is going to be part one of the build of it, showing how it works, the theory behind it, how I'm hoping it's going to work, and then we're going to kind of go over the issues that I had and what I'm hoping to do in part two to maybe get this thing working the way that I want it to. So the first part of this build is going to be to disassemble the RO that I was using last year. So going from left to right on here, the thing on the left, that's our booster pump. The next over, that is the kind of the pre-filter housing. That's for larger particles or whatever might be in your sap that gets that stuff filtered out. Then kind of tucked in between there next is the pressure gauge. That tells us how many PSI we've got in our lines at the moment. And then from there, it runs into the first of the RO membrane housings. And then those are 150 GPD membranes. So we've got 2 of those. They're running in series, so it runs through the first one. The concentrate that comes out from the first one then runs into the second one, and then from the second one that runs out into the concentrate tank. Now, after building this one last year, even with only having about 50 taps last year, I did find that this was running at about max capacity to keep up with concentrating the amount of sap I was getting from that number of taps. So at the end of the season last year, I decided that one thing that I was definitely going to need to do would be to upgrade the system. Now, as it just so happened, at the end of 2024, Membrane Solutions, which is the same company that I purchased my 2 150 GPD membranes from, contacted me, and they offered to send me out some new membranes for upgrading my system. And they sent me not 1, not 2, but 4 400 GPD gallon per day membranes for use in this project. Now the first part of this build is going to be making the frame that these housings and the pump and filter and all that sort of stuff is going to sit on. Last year all I did was just mount everything to a board, and then I hooked that board to one of the posts underneath the mill house. It didn't work great, so we're going to make a freestanding frame for this to be on this year. And because we've got 4 of the membrane housings this time as well, we're going to need to be able to hook stuff on both sides of the main board. Now I've gone ahead and cut 4 holes into this piece of wood here, and you're going to notice that I've also put in 4 little notches into each one of these. Now on the outside of the RO housing, there's a little rib on each one of those sides, and those are going to slide down into there, and that is going to hold the bottom part of the housing in place. That way, when we go to tighten the lid of each one of these membranes down on, we're not going to have to hold on to the bottom part. That'll just be held in place by the frame, and we can just kind of crank down on that lid. It'll make it a whole lot easier to tighten them down. Now, as I started putting the first fittings onto the housings of the membranes, this is when I came across the first little hiccup in my plan. And that is that the input fitting, the one that's on the top of each one of these housings, it is actually fitted for a 3/8 RO tubing. And that's just because this is a larger housing. It's a larger, higher GPD membrane. The bottom ones are still the 1/4 inch, which is what I had on last year's 150, but the upper one, the input, is a 3/8, and this was an oversight on my part that I hadn't quite looked into this far enough when I was kind of planning things out, and I didn't realize that it was a larger size for that. Now fortunately, I did happen to have some fittings that would fit into there that would screw into the tops that were actually the 1/4 inch size. So this allowed me to kind of go ahead and get everything put together with the 1/4 inch tubing. I only had 3 of those, so I did end up having to pick up a 4th one of them later, but we just kind of pretended like that was there for getting everything put together here initially, and then I put that one in later, got everything hooked up for the final fitment. Now, before we go from the normal to the mad scientist part of this build, I'm going to pull up a little drawing here, and I think with this it's a little bit easier to follow along where the different hoses are going to and from on here. And this is actually what I was using while I was building this to make sure that I was putting everything together right. This was the initial drawing to help me figure out ahead of time whether or not I thought this might work. So here is my rough drawing of how everything kind of fits together here. As you see, we've got 3 different tanks here along the bottom. We've got sap, permeate, and concentrate. All of our blue lines are either sap or concentrate lines, and then the pink line is our permeate or pure water line. The yellow is the pump, the green is the filter, that is our pressure gauge, the red are the RO membrane filters. And each one of these little black tick marks going across the line is where there's a valve through here. Now you're going to notice that at the top and bottom of each one of these membranes, there's either 3 inputs or 3 outputs. Now up at the top, you can see that we can feed into each one of the membranes from the sap line coming from the sap tank. Now in addition to that, there is also an input into the top of the filter that comes from the bottom of 2 of the other RO housings. Now at the bottom, there are 3 outputs. Again, for the blue, either the concentrate sap lines, there's 3 outputs down here. One of those goes down, and that feeds directly into the concentrate. The other 2 outputs are ones that go to 2 of the other RO membrane housings, and that goes up to the top. So that would then feed into an input of one of the other housings. This is just repeated on all 4 of these housings, where you've got the 3 inputs on the top, 3 outputs on the bottom for the sap, and then there's 1 output at the bottom for each one of these for your permeate. Now in addition to that, you can see there's a permeate line that connects between the line that goes to the permeate tank and around to the line where your sap is drawing in. This is for doing a permeate flush, so that is so that we can tie around with that without having to switch your lines around from different tanks. Now off to the side, this is something I didn't add in, but you can see that there's a little drain line that I drew in. I didn't actually put that in when I was building it, but that would allow you to drain stuff out when you're flushing the system without having to adjust your needle valve. So hopefully that'll make it make a little bit more sense here as you're watching all of these lines be hooked up to various things and go crisscross across the system. And when I explain here in just a minute about how all this works and why it's designed this way, you'll be able to kind of follow along a little bit better. And on the back side of this board, opposite of our membranes, this is where we're going to mount the pump and the pre-filter and our pressure gauge. One thing that I did mess up on this, and I had to get this switched around after I started to do the testing, was that I got the input and the output switched on the pump. That should have been reversed, so the left side of the pump, that is the side that should be feeding to the filter, and the right side is where the liquid's coming in. I got those switched around by accident as I was putting this on here, but other than that, everything on here is pretty straightforward for getting this part hooked up. Alright, so now that we got this entire mess of lines here, you're probably wondering how the heck this thing even works. Alright, so we're actually ready to start running sap through here now. And there's 4 different main ways that we can do it. So for the most part, we're probably going to be running all 4 of these in series. So we'd be running the sap through 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then it's going to go to our concentrate tank. And that way, each one it goes through, it concentrates it a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, with the way we've got it set up here, we can change up the direction that the sap is going through them, the order that the sap runs through these filters. And we can do that without having to, manually, I mean, we have to manually change valves, but without having to change the actual filters themselves, because we want all the filters to be used fairly evenly, instead of just running it in the same order time after time after time, running 1,000 or 2,000 gallons of sap through it. We want to kind of change it up so that, this one's used first, and then this one's used first, and that one's first, and that one's first, and they all kind of get equal use throughout the system. So the way we can do that is, this is our sap line coming in through here. And then with this, we can have sap going to any of these 4 filters as our first filter. So the easiest one, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And so to do that, we would open it up here. That way it's running into here. And then we want to make sure it's running through the filters. So this one and this one is turned off. And that's going to force it through this filter housing. We're going to come down through here. On this side, the right side here, this is where our concentrated sap comes out. The left side, this is where the permeate, or our pure water, comes out through over here. So down here, we have 3 different options for where this concentrated sap can go. Either it can go out the back here, we have a valve here, and then this leads to the line that comes out over here. And this is our concentrated sap that goes to our concentrate tank. This is our needle valve. This is what creates pressure in the system. But this is our concentrate outlet over here. So since we want to run from 1 over to 2, we want to make sure this valve back here is shut, because we don't want that going to the concentrate tank yet. And then it's going to come up here. We're going to open this one, so this flows up into our second one. This is shut and this is shut, so that's going to force it through this one. Come down here, our back valve is shut. And then we want it to go to 3, so we'll open that one up. This one over here is shut, so we don't have to worry about it going that way. That's shut. Going to come over here into 3, force it down through here, come out down in the bottom. This valve back here is shut. We want it to go to 4, so we'll open that one up. This will go up to here. That one's shut, that one's shut. We're just going to force it down through our 4th and final filter. And then, let's see, that's shut, that one's shut. Then we want to now open up this one in back, and this is going to let the sap come out to our concentrate line. And then that way we get it running through all 4 of the filters in series. Now, you can run this backwards in the reverse order as well. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and shut all the ones that we just opened. So turn all of those shut. And now we want it to run 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to open that one up. It's going to run down through here, come down through the housing. This is shut back here. We want it to go to 3 next. So we'll open that guy. It's going to run up in here through 3. We want it to go to 4. We'll open, or not 4, 2, up to 2. It's going to run down through this one, come out through here. We want it to go to 1. So we'll open that guy up. It'll run up to 1, come down through here, and then we want to open up the valve in back to let that concentrated sap come out through here and run out through our concentrate line. Now the other 2 ways that we can run it would be to do 2, 1, 4, 3, or 3, 4, 1, 2. And it's basically the same sort of thing. So if we want to run 2 first, we'll open this one up like that. I'm going to run down through our number 2 one here. It's going to come up through here. I'm going to open that up so it's flowing to housing number 1. It'll come down through here. Now from 1, we want to take it over to 4. So we want to open that one up. It'll come through 4, down through here. And then from 4, we're going to end on 3. So we open that one up. Runs down through 3, come down here, open that up. We're good to go. And then, I mean, it's the exact same thing. Again, if you want to run it from 3, 4, 1, 2, you're just going to do the same thing. Just trace it through, open your valves. You'd have that one shut, that one open, and just run back through the opposite way. Now, if you wanted, you would not have to necessarily run with all 4 of the membranes. You would be able to run it with, say, 3 if you wanted. And so, you know, it would be the same thing. You're just going to trace it through 1, 2, 3, and then instead of going from 3 to 4, you're just going to open up this number 3 valve. You're going to leave the other 2 outlets coming out of 3 shut, and then that's just going to run out through here, and then you're only running it through 3. Maybe you had an issue, maybe one of your housings cracked, you left it out and it froze or something, whatever the case may be, you know, it allows you to run it with fewer. And then another, and again with that, I mean, you can run it in any configuration pretty much that you want for doing, you know, 3 of the filters. And then another option would be that if you wanted to do 2 sets of 2 filters in series. With that, we'd open up 1, it's going to run down through here. We want it to go to 2, open that one up, it's going to flow down through 2. We would then open up this one back here. That's going to send it to our concentrate tank line out through the back of that one. And then we're going to open up 3. So it's going to flow down through here. We want it to go through this housing and then up to 4, open that one up. It's going to run down through here. We open up the 4. And now you have 2 sets of 2 membranes running in series. I'm not quite sure what the advantage of this would be. I haven't run any volume tests to see, you know, what you can get with the different numbers, but it gives you a lot of flexibility with how you can run it. And the main thing, like I said, is just I'm planning on running it with 4 in series pretty much all the time, I think. But this just allows me to change the order without having to physically pull membrane filters out of here and switch them up. So right here we've got our booster pump. This, you can just stick a little piece right on here. So this part right here, this is where our raw sap is coming in. This is coming from our collection tank into here, and then this is going to run up to our pump. Now, what I've also done is I'm adding in a Permeate flush loop in here. So this one right here, this is our concentrate coming out of here. And then this line right here is going to our Permeate tank because we need to collect some of the Permeate, some of that really, really pure water to use for flushing the entire system once we're done. What I've done is I've added in a couple more valves right in here. And this is our Permeate line right here coming from the RO membranes. So what we can do is once we're completely done for the day of running sap through here, I can open up the needle valve all the way, and that is going to mean that we're not going to be getting any Permeate pushing through the filter. Nothing's going to be forcing any Permeate out. So I can close this one here. See, when I go through and explain it, I find all the issues with what I've done. Okay, so this is where our sap would normally come in. This is where our Permeate's coming out. I've made a bridge across here so that when we're all done for the day, we can close that. I can then open up this valve. So this is the one that's leading down to our Permeate tank. This comes across here. This runs up to our pump right here. You can't really see it too well, but this is running up to our pump. I can close this one right here. This is where our sap is coming in, but we've already gone through all that, so there's no more sap to come in. So if we close this, we open this, now we're sucking liquid from our Permeate tank. And so this allows us to, without having to switch around any hoses or anything like that, we can just turn a couple valves, actually 3 valves, and then we can immediately start sucking that Permeate in to flush the system out. Alrighty folks, well I think we're ready to give this thing its maiden voyage here, give it a little test out. So I've got this hooked up to our feed tank. This is it's a sap heater to warm it up a little bit before it runs through the RO. This will be a separate video, and I don't think this has come out yet at the time that this one's going up for the RO. So that'll be something that we'll be building here in a little bit, even though it's already been built. So that way we can run a little bit of warm sap through this. It's more efficient when the sap's a little bit warmer. If the sap's cold, you don't get quite as high of gallons per hour, gallons per day, whatever this will run through it. So I think we're ready to start opening up some valves and seeing if this thing works. So this is where the real fun began. This is when all of the little things that I'd overlooked in the planning part and the build part, all those little things started coming to light, and I started having to problem solve and troubleshoot what was going on with the system. The overarching issue that I was running into is that I was not able to build sufficient pressure. You want this to be around 80 to 90 psi. That is what is pushing the water through the membranes. That's what's purifying the water and then leaving behind your concentrated sap. And I was only able to get it up to around 40 to 45 psi, so about half of what I was wanting to shoot for. Now, my initial thought was that I was probably getting some little air locks somewhere in the system. I've got a lot of tubing on there, a lot of little places where you might be getting some issues with that. And so I started going around trying to bleed the system. I added in a couple more valves in a couple different places to try and be able to run the pump and then open those up, letting the air bleed out, trying different things like that. And I just was not able to get it to build pressure beyond there. Now, one thing that I discovered as I was trying to do a little bit more research into this is that the pump that I was using, the booster pump that I was using, it's actually not rated to be used on a system this large. So that is one potential issue that I could be running into, is that it's just not able to push the liquid through fast enough, hard enough to bleed air out and build pressure that way. Another sort of related issue is that these are technically booster pumps. They aren't really designed to be taking it from 0 psi all the way up to 90. They are better suited to be taking it from maybe 40 psi up to there, and doing half as much of the work. So one potential idea would be to put a pre-booster pump in between your feed tank, your sap feed tank, and the booster pump. That way it's taking it up to maybe 45 psi, and then your booster pump's only having to take it up to that 80 or 90 psi. This would potentially help to push more sap through the system a little bit faster, a little bit more easily. That's another option that would work. I do actually have a pump that I can use for that, and I'm going to do some tests with that in the next video, and that potentially might help with this issue. I also have a larger pump on the way for this as well, something that is better suited for this size of a system. In addition to that, this larger pump that I've got coming in has 3/8 inch fittings on it. So that means I'm going to be able to run 3/8 lines all the way from my sap tank through the pump into the filters, whereas the old pump that I got, that only has 1/4 inch fittings set up for that. So that'll make it easier to run a higher volume of sap through the system. So as you've seen, things didn't quite go as well as I'd planned them to, but that's kind of to be expected. So as you can see here in back, we've got rid of all of the fancy, complicated looking stuff off from here, and it's now down to just a basic RO. And as you can see, we've got our sap coming in here, a single line coming in, a single line coming out the bottom, single line going in the next one of the second one, same thing into the third, out from the bottom of the second into the third, out the bottom of the third into the fourth, out the bottom of the fourth, and then there's our needle valve that adds the back pressure, which allows us to concentrate the stuff down. This is the very, very, very simple system. That's all that you really need, and it works. Even with having a slightly undersized pump, it was still able to concentrate it, and even with not having the 3/8 line coming into at least our first one, again, it was still able to concentrate the sap down. So the numbers that we're looking at with this system is that I'm able to remove about 10 gallons of pure water per hour. Now, the sap coming out of the trees this year is sitting around 1.5%. It's not great, but I don't really have a whole lot of say in the matter, so that's just what we're working with for this year. Now, at that rate, that means that one of these 65-gallon barrels equates to about 1 gallon of finished syrup. It's not a great ratio, but again, that's what we're working with for this year. So running one of these barrels through the system, I'm going to end up with about 50 gallons of Permeate, pure water, and 15 gallons of concentrate. the concentrate that we're getting out of the system, running it through one pass. I'm not recirculating anything. It's coming out of the sap barrel and then running into a concentrate barrel. Coming out after a single pass through 4 of these filters, I'm getting it up to around 6 to 7% sugar. So 4 to a little over 4 times the concentration that it's starting out as the sap from the tree. Now, to put that in different terms, I'm able to boil about 10 gallons of water off an hour using my evaporator arch, so about the same speed as what this does. But it's not something that I have to actively participate in. You know, I just set this thing up and let her rip, and I can be doing other stuff around here while this is getting it concentrated down. And 10 gallons an hour, that's 5 hours of boiling. So for each one of these barrels, this is 5 hours of boiling that I don't have to do, that this thing takes care of for me. So I'm going from maybe 6 to 7 hours of boiling for one of these barrels down to about 1 to 2 hours of boiling for the same amount of sap in here that's been concentrated down. So this is a huge amount of time savings per barrel even of sap that comes in. I've run about 500 gallons of sap through it so far this year, and we're only a couple weeks into the season. So that's probably around 400 gallons or so, give or take, of water that this thing has pulled out that I haven't had to boil. And again, putting that into hours of boil time, that's about 40 hours of boiling that I haven't had to do. Now, like I already mentioned, I'm going to be doing some upgrades in part 2, and that's going to be a larger pump. It's got about the same PSI that it'll take it up to, but it has a higher flow rate. So hopefully that will help with having these larger RO membranes on here. I also have some of the 3/8 RO tubing coming in, so that we'll be able to run 3/8 going from the sap feed tank over here all the way through the pump, through the filter, the pre-filter, not the RO membrane, but the pre-filter, and then as far as our first membrane here, and then after this point it's going to be 1/4 inch from there. Now I know they sent it with the 3/8 for the tops of all of these, but you got to remember that by the time we've taken it out of this first one, we've already reduced the amount of flow that's going through the rest of the system with each time it passes through. So I think the 1/4 inch going the rest of the way through should be fine. We're going to test it that way first, just make sure everything seems to be working. And then I think what I'm going to try doing is coming back, redoing the system like I had it originally. We'll have a 3/8 rail going along the top that will feed down into there. Everything kind of on the bottom part is then going to still be the 1/4 inch lines, but we're going to test it with that. We'll have the more flow, bigger pump, all that sort of stuff, see if we can make it work that way. And then the other thing I can try doing as well is, of course, using that little other pump that would be sort of like a pre-booster pump. And that's able to at least get it up to around 45 psi, and that'll kind of help the booster pump to not have to work quite as hard, and it should hopefully be able to maybe push some of the air out of the lines if our new booster pump isn't able to do that on its own. So got a few ideas on how to possibly make this work, but it's just going to take some more experimentation, do a little trial and error, and figuring out what exactly it is that we need to change in order to make the new system work. Now, I'm not 100% sure when part 2 is going to be out. We've had really weird weather so far this year for doing tapping, so right now I have already run all the sap that I have on hand through the system, and it may be another week or so after when I film this video before I'm going to have any more sap coming in, because it's going to be warm out, so there's not going to be anything running. So it's going to be a little bit before that's going to be out, but I've got some other videos that we'll be putting out in between there. And then hopefully the part 2 of this one is going to be getting it up and running and working the way that I wanted it to in this video. So once again, a big thank you to Membrane Solutions for sending me these. That is going to be it for today's video. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.